He was already written off as gone. Tied up in the back of a plain white van, barely conscious, a U.S. Marine pressed his face against the cold metal wall and listened as footsteps passed just a few feet away. People came and went. Doors opened, engines started. No one looked twice. No one heard the faint sound he was trying to make. No one, except a single dog standing in the snow. The Marine didn't have a phone. He couldn't speak. All he had left was one last signal. 3 quiet taps, a code only someone trained would recognize. He didn't know if it would work. He didn't even know if anyone was watching. But the dog was. And what happened next would expose a crime no one saw coming, stop a killer who thought he was invisible, and prove that sometimes the difference between life and death isn't who hears you scream. It's who notices when you can't. Snow drifted sideways across the rest stop like ash from a dying fire. It clung to the asphalt, melted, then froze again, turning the parking lot into a patchwork of dull ice and dirty slush. Tractor trailers rumbled in and out, their engines groaning as drivers hurried inside for coffee, warmth, or a few minutes of rest before getting back on the road. Everything about the place felt temporary. People came, people left. Nothing was meant to stay. At the far edge of the lot, where the yellow glow of the lights thinned into shadow, a plain white delivery van sat with its engine running. Inside the van, Staff Sergeant Lucas Reed pressed his forehead weakly against the cold metal wall and tried to breathe without panicking. His wrists were cinched tight with plastic restraints, the edges biting into swollen skin. Duct tape pulled cruelly at his mouth, stretching every time his chest shuddered. His body ached in places he couldn't feel clearly anymore. Bruises layered over bruises, exhaustion sinking deeper than pain. He had stopped counting how many times the van had stopped. Gas stations, back roads, highway pull-offs. Each time he waited, listening, hoping for a voice, a footstep, anything that meant someone might open the door. Each time, nothing happened. Now the van had pulled into this rest stop, and Lucas felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself in days. Hope. Through the narrow gap between the sunshade and the tinted window, he could see shapes moving, boots crunching on snow, the blur of coats and headlights. So many people. So close. He tried to call out, but the sound died in his throat, swallowed by tape and weakness. His heart pounded harder as footsteps passed by, one after another, never slowing. They were all looking through him, not at him. Then he saw something different. Low to the ground, just beyond the reach of the light, a shape moved and stopped. Lucas squinted, his vision swimming. It wasn't a person. It was too small, too still. A dog, maybe. Gray fur, dusted with snow, standing near the front of the van. The animal didn't wander. It didn't sniff the ground or circle for food. It simply stood there, head lifted, eyes fixed on the vehicle as if it belonged to it. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He shifted as much as the restraints allowed and angled his head, trying to catch the dog's attention through the reflection on the glass. The movement sent a spike of pain through his shoulder, and he bit down hard, stifling a groan. The dog didn't move away. Inside the rest stop building, the automatic doors slid open and shut, letting in bursts of cold air and the sound of traffic. Emma Collins stepped inside, stamping snow from her boots. She had just finished a 12-hour night shift at a small clinic down the road, her shoulders stiff, her eyes heavy. All she wanted was coffee strong enough to cut through the fog in her head before the drive home. She stood in line, staring at nothing in particular, when she noticed the dog outside. It stood apart from the others. There were always strays near places like this. But this one wasn't begging. It wasn't pacing or nosing around trash cans. It was standing perfectly still, facing the same direction, as if guarding something invisible. Emma followed its gaze and saw the white van idling at the edge of the lot. Something about the scene made her pause. The van's engine had been running for a while now. Too long, no driver in sight, no delivery logo on the side, no company markings at all. Just blank white metal humming softly in the cold. She told herself she was tired. After years in emergency medicine, her brain was trained to find danger everywhere. Still, she couldn't look away. Outside, Lucas watched people move in and out of the building. A man laughed loudly as he passed, his breath puffing white. A woman scrolled on her phone, her coat pulled tight. None of them glanced toward the shadows where the van sat. None of them saw him. The dog shifted its weight slightly, paws crunching against the snow, and lifted its head higher. Its ears pricked forward, alert but not aggressive. Lucas swallowed hard. If he could just make a sound loud enough. If he could just do something. He scraped his fingernail against the metal wall as gently as he could manage. The sound was barely there, more vibration than noise. The dog's head snapped toward the van. Lucas's pulse surged. His breath came faster, fogging the glass. He tried again, slower this time, forcing control into shaking fingers. One faint scrape, then another. He waited, his heart hammering, listening to the engine, the wind, the world that seemed determined to ignore him. The dog took a step closer. Inside the building, Emma accepted her coffee and moved toward the window. She hadn't planned to watch the dog, but she found herself doing it anyway. She saw it approach the van and stop, its body tense, its focus absolute. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the cold. If these stories touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Paws of Courage. Every click helps us share more tales of courage, compassion, and the incredible bonds that change lives. One dog, one human, one story at a time. Emma didn't hear the low scrape from inside the van. She didn't hear Lucas's labored breathing or feel the panic pressing in on him, but she felt something else, an unease she couldn't name, a sense that the ordinary rhythm of the rest stop had slipped, just slightly, out of place. Outside, Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, gathering what little strength he had left. He didn't know the dog's name. He didn't know where it had come from or why it had stopped. All he knew was that for the first time since he'd been taken, something had noticed him. He lifted his hand again and scraped the metal once more, weaker than before. The dog remained there, silent and unmoving, as snow gathered on its back and the engine hummed on. And in that frozen corner of the rest stop, a man who had been invisible finally understood one thing with terrifying clarity. He didn't need everyone to see him. He just needed one. Emma pushed through the glass doors and stepped back into the cold, the wind biting sharper now that her body had begun to relax. She pulled her coat tighter around her and took a slow sip of coffee, letting the heat ground her. The rest stop looked the same as it always did. Cars coming and going, drivers stretching stiff legs, a few smokers hunched near the trash cans, but the feeling she'd had inside didn't fade. Her eyes went straight to the dog. It stood closer to the white van now, angled slightly toward the rear door. Snow dusted its back and darkened the fur along its spine. One of its front legs was held just a touch lighter than the others, as if an old injury still bothered it. It didn't pace. It didn't whine. It didn't glance at the building or the people moving in and out. It watched the van with a focus that made Emma slow her steps without realizing it. She'd grown up around animals. Her father had raised hunting dogs, the kind that vibrated with energy and expectation. This dog was different. There was no excitement in its posture, no fear either. What she saw instead was restraint, purpose. A pickup truck rolled past, headlights briefly washing over the scene. The dog didn't flinch. The van continued to idle, exhaust curling into the air in soft white plumes. Emma stopped a few yards away, close enough to see the dog clearly, but far enough not to startle it. "Hey there," she said softly, not sure why she'd spoken at all. "You lost?" The dog flicked one ear in her direction, but didn't turn its head. Its eyes stayed locked on the van. That unsettled her more than if it had growled. A man came out of the building behind her, pulling on gloves as he walked. He tossed something toward the edge of the lot, a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in paper. It landed with a wet slap on the snow. "Here," he called. "Go on." The dog didn't move. The man frowned, then shrugged and headed for his car. Emma watched the sandwich sit untouched, steam rising faintly from it. Any stray she'd ever known would have been on it in seconds. This dog didn't even acknowledge it existed. "Okay," she murmured, more to herself than the dog. "That's new." She took another step closer. The dog finally turned its head and looked at her. Its eyes were a deep amber, steady and unblinking. There was no plea in them, no expectation, just awareness. "I'm not going to chase you off," Emma said, instinctively lowering her voice. "I was just checking." The dog studied her for a long moment, then shifted its stance slightly so that it was squarely between her and the van. Not blocking her exactly. Just positioned. Emma felt the hair on her arms rise beneath her coat. Before she could think through what that meant, a voice cut through the air behind her. "Funny thing about strays," the man said. "They pick the worst places to hang around." Emma turned. A tall man stood a few steps away, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his jacket. He wore work boots and a dark knit cap pulled low over neatly combed hair. His smile was easy, practiced. "I'm sorry," Emma said. "Didn't see you there." "No worries." He followed her gaze to the dog and chuckled lightly. "They're everywhere around these stops. Folks feed 'em, think they're helping, but all it does is keep them from moving on." The dog didn't react to his voice, but Emma noticed something else. Its body had stiffened. Not enough for anyone else to catch, maybe, but enough for her. The injured leg straightened, weight redistributing evenly, as if the dog had decided pain was secondary now. "That your van?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. The man nodded. "Yeah, just making a quick delivery run. Stopped for coffee." She glanced back at the vehicle. Up close, it was even plainer than she'd thought. No logos, no dents. Clean, almost too clean for something that supposedly hauled freight. "You leave it running in weather like this?" she asked. He smiled again, but this time it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Habit. Diesel engines don't love the cold." Emma nodded, though something in her tightened. She looked back at the dog. It hadn't moved. It hadn't growled or bared its teeth. It simply stood there, eyes flicking once to the man, then back to the van. "You don't like dogs?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him. "Not really," he said after a beat. "Nothing personal, just never trusted animals that think too much." Emma's grip tightened on her coffee cup. "Seems like this one's thinking plenty." He laughed softly. "Or it's just dumb luck. Anyway, I should get going." He stepped toward the van. The dog moved at the same time. It didn't lunge. It didn't bark. It took 2 deliberate steps forward and stopped directly, in the man's path. The smile slipped from his face, just for a moment. "Hey," he said, sharper now. "Get out of the way." The dog didn't. Emma's pulse thudded in her ears. "Maybe you should give it a second," she said. "It might move on if you don't rush it." The man looked at her, irritation flickering beneath the surface, calm. Then he forced another smile and took a step back. "Fine, I've got time." He turned and walked toward the building, shoulders stiff. Emma watched him go, then looked back at the dog. "What is it you're guarding?" she whispered. The dog lowered its head slightly and stared at the van again. Inside, Lucas Reed squeezed his eyes shut as footsteps approached, then faded away. His breath came in shallow bursts. He didn't know who had been outside. He didn't know what had just happened. But he felt it. The pause, the hesitation, the thin crack in the wall closing around him. He scraped the metal again, weaker than before. Outside, the dog's ears twitched. Emma felt it then, clear and unmistakable. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't just a stray acting odd. This dog wasn't waiting for food. It was waiting for something to happen. Grant Harlow stayed inside longer than Emma expected. Through the glass, she watched him move about the convenience area with unhurried ease, chatting with the clerk, laughing at something one of the truckers said. He had the posture of a man who knew exactly how much space he was allowed to take and never more. Nothing about him looked dangerous. That, more than anything, made her uneasy. Outside, the dog never left its place. Snow continued to fall in thin, lazy sheets, catching in the coarse fur along its back. Emma shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the cold creeping up through the soles of her boots. She told herself she should leave. She'd already lingered longer than necessary, but every time she turned toward her car, her eyes slid back to the van, to the quiet shape standing guard beside it. Grant finally emerged again, pulling on a pair of leather gloves. He paused when he saw Emma still there. "You okay?" he asked lightly. "Thought you'd be long gone by now." "Just warming up," she said, lifting her coffee a fraction. "Long night." He nodded in understanding. "Medical?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Clinic, nothing dramatic." "Those can be worse," he said. "All the responsibility, none of the credit." She studied him as he spoke. His voice was calm, friendly, with a faint hint of something she couldn't place. He glanced at the dog again, his smile tightening at the corners. "Still hanging around, huh?" he said. "Persistent little thing." The dog did not look at him. Grant took a step toward the van. The dog shifted with him, maintaining the same distance, same angle, not aggressive, just present. A flicker of annoyance crossed Grant's face before he masked it. "You mind calling it off?" he asked Emma. "I don't want to run it over pulling out." "It's not mine," she replied. "Figures." He exhaled through his nose, then crouched slightly, extending one gloved hand. "Hey boy, come on, shoo." The dog's ears flattened. Not in fear, but in focus. It didn't retreat. It didn't advance. Emma felt her heart pick up its pace. "Maybe don't," she said. "Some dogs don't like hands coming at them." Grant straightened slowly. "You know a lot about dogs." "Enough," she said. "Enough to know this one isn't looking for trouble." He studied her for a moment, eyes sharp now. "Then what do you think it's doing?" Emma didn't answer right away. She looked at the van, at the faint vibration of the metal panels, at the steady plume of exhaust curling into the air. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Grant laughed softly, shaking his head. "You medical folks see meaning in everything. Trust me, it's just a stray that found a warm engine." The words sounded reasonable, logical. Emma wanted to accept them, but her gaze dropped to the dog's paws. They were planted firmly in the snow, claws digging in for traction, as if it expected to be pushed and meant to hold its ground. Grant took another step forward. This time, the dog let out a low sound, not a growl, more like a breath pushed through clenched teeth. Grant froze. Around them, the rest stop went on as usual. A sedan pulled out of its space. Someone slammed a door. Laughter drifted from the smoking area. No one else seemed to notice the small triangle of tension forming near the edge of the lot. Grant's jaw tightened. "That's enough," he said quietly. Emma stepped closer without thinking. "Hey," she said, her voice firmer now. "It's not doing anything. Let's all just slow down." Grant turned toward her, his expression smoothing over once more. "You're right," he said. "No need to make a scene." He backed away, raising his hands slightly in a gesture of peace. The dog remained where it was, watching him with unblinking eyes. Grant forced a chuckle. "Guess I'll finish my coffee before I head out." Let it calm down. He walked back toward the building, shoulders stiff. Emma watched until the doors closed behind him. Only then did she realize she'd been holding her breath. Inside the van, Lucas Reed heard voices outside. Muffled, indistinct. His pulse hammered against his ribs. He strained to listen, to catch a word, a tone, anything that told him what was happening. The pressure of the restraints cut into his wrists as he shifted, pain blooming hot and sharp. He scraped the metal again, desperate now. The sound was barely audible over the engine, but it was enough. Outside, the dog's head snapped toward the van. Its body tensed, every muscle coiling tight. Emma followed its gaze. "What is it?" she whispered. The dog stepped closer to the van and pressed its nose to the seam of the rear door. It inhaled deeply, then lifted its head and looked straight at Emma. For the first time, its eyes held something unmistakable. Urgency. Her mouth went dry. She took a step toward the van, heart thudding. "Is someone in there?" she murmured, feeling foolish even as the thought formed. The dog didn't answer, of course. It turned back to the van and scratched once at the metal, not frantic, controlled. Emma's skin prickled. She reached out, hesitating just inches from the dog's shoulder, then let her hand fall. She didn't know why, but touching it felt wrong somehow. This wasn't a moment for comfort. The doors of the building slid open again. Grant stepped out, coffee cup in hand. His eyes went immediately to Emma's position near the van. For the first time since she'd met him, the smile didn't come. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone flat. Emma straightened. "I thought I heard something." Grant's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to her. "You didn't." She held his eyes. "I'm pretty sure I did." For a long second, neither of them moved. Snow whispered against the ground. The engine hummed. Then Grant smiled again. Wider this time, almost too wide. "You're tired," he said gently. "Long shift, remember?" Behind him, the dog let out another low sound. Louder now. And somewhere inside the van, a man who had not been seen in days pressed his bound hands against cold metal and waited. Emma didn't answer Grant right away. She stood there, the cold seeping through her coat, her eyes fixed on the van as if it might suddenly confess what it was hiding. The engine's steady hum felt louder now, almost intrusive, like a heartbeat that didn't belong. "I know what tired feels like," she said at last. "This isn't it." Grant let out a short laugh and took a sip of his coffee. "You're reading into things," he said. "People do that late at night. Your brain fills in blanks that aren't there." Behind him, the dog shifted its weight and pressed its nose closer to the seam of the rear door. Its breath fogged the metal. Emma noticed something then, something she'd missed before. The dog wasn't scratching randomly. Its paw lifted, tapped the metal once, then dropped. A pause. Then again, and again. 3 times. The sound was faint, almost swallowed by the engine, but the rhythm made her chest tighten. She frowned, watching more carefully now. Inside the van, Lucas Reed fought to keep his breathing quiet. The effort sent stars bursting across his vision. He could hear voices outside, one calm, one closer, sharper with concern. He didn't know who they belonged to, only that time was slipping through his fingers. He flexed his hands against the restraints, pain shooting up his arms, and forced his knuckles against the metal wall. Tap. He waited, counting in his head, the way he'd been trained. Tap, tap, 3. He held still, his pulse roaring in his ears. If this failed, he didn't know if he'd have the strength to try again. Outside, the dog froze. Its ears went rigid, every muscle locking into place as if someone had flipped a switch. It lifted its head and stared at the van, then turned sharply toward Emma. She felt it like a jolt. "What?" she whispered. The dog moved away from the door and stopped directly in front of her. It looked up at her face, held her gaze, then lifted one paw and tapped the frozen ground. Once, twice, 3 times. Emma's breath caught. A memory surfaced uninvited. Years old, buried under routine and fatigue. A disaster response seminar she'd attended early in her career. A military medic explaining nonverbal distress signals used when speech wasn't possible. 3 taps, 3 knocks, 3 flashes. SOS. Her heart began to pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. That's not possible, she murmured, even as her mind raced ahead of her doubt. Grant watched the exchange, his eyes narrowing. You okay? He asked again, his voice tighter now. You look like you've seen a ghost. Emma didn't look at him. She crouched slowly, bringing herself level with the dog. Did you hear something? She asked softly. The dog turned back toward the van and scraped its paw along the metal this time, leaving 3 thin, parallel lines in the layer of grime and salt. Emma's stomach dropped. No, she whispered. Oh no. Grant stepped forward sharply. That's enough, he snapped. You're freaking yourself out over nothing. She stood, facing him now. There's someone in that van. The words hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Grant's expression flickered, just for an instant. Then it hardened. That's a serious accusation, he said. You should be careful what you say. I am being careful, Emma replied. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. I heard tapping. The dog heard it. 3 taps, 3 marks. That's not random. He scoffed. You think a stray understands Morse code? No, she said. I think it understands distress. Grant's jaw clenched. You need to step away from my vehicle. The dog moved again, placing itself between them. It didn't bare its teeth. It didn't growl. It simply stood there, unmovable. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She reached into her coat pocket and wrapped her fingers around her phone. I'm calling the police. Grant's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. The contact was brief, just long enough for her to feel the strength in his grip. But it was enough. Her heart lurched. Don't, he said quietly. You'll regret it. The dog reacted instantly. It lunged, not at Grant's face or throat, but at his sleeve, snapping onto the fabric with precision and force. Grant cursed and jerked his arm back, stumbling a step. Emma yanked free, her phone clattering to the ground. Get it off, he shouted, panic breaking through his composure. The dog released just as quickly as it had latched on and retreated to Emma's side, body low, eyes locked on Grant. The shout drew attention. A trucker near the entrance turned, frowning. A woman pumping gas paused, nozzle in hand. Grant glanced around, breathing hard. His eyes darted to the van, then back to Emma. You don't know what you're doing, he said, his voice dropping. Walk away. Now. Emma bent to grab her phone, her hands trembling. Open the van, she said. If there's nothing inside, I'll apologize. I'll buy you a tank of gas. Whatever you want. For a long moment, Grant said nothing. Snow drifted down around them, settling on shoulders and hoods, on the dog's back, on the untouched sandwich lying half-buried nearby. Then, faint but unmistakable, came another sound. Tap, tap, tap. This time Emma heard it. Her eyes flew to the rear doors. Grant's face went pale. The dog growled low in its chest, a warning that vibrated through the frozen air. Emma's voice came out hoarse. That's him, she said. That's someone asking for help. Grant took a step back, calculating, his gaze flicking toward the building and the people watching now. The calm mask was gone. What remained was something sharp and dangerous. Inside the van, Lucas sagged against the wall, his strength nearly spent. He didn't know if anyone had heard him. He didn't know if the dog was still there. But he'd given the signal. And somewhere beyond the metal and the dark, someone had finally understood. The tension snapped, not with a shout or a blow, but with a scream. "My son!" a woman cried from near the restroom entrance. "I can't find my son!" The words cut through the cold air like glass breaking. Heads turned all at once. A man dropped his coffee. Someone else swore under their breath. The small cluster that had begun to gather near the van hesitated, then drifted instinctively toward the sound of panic. Emma's heart lurched. She turned just in time to see a woman stumble backward against the vending machines, her face drained of color, her hands shaking so badly she had to brace herself on the wall. "Evan," the woman sobbed. "He was right here. I only looked away for a second." The spell broke. People rushed toward her, questions flying over one another. "How old?" "When did you last see him?" "Check the men's room." Grant seized the moment. "That's awful," he said, his voice loud and steady, the picture of concern. "Kids wander off all the time in places like this." He took a step away from the van, angling his body toward the building. "We should help her." Emma stared at him, realization blooming cold and sharp in her chest. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. The dog didn't move. While everyone else surged toward the woman in the restrooms, the dog remained planted in front of the van, head low, eyes bright and watchful. It glanced once at Emma, then back at the vehicle, as if drawing a line only the two of them could see. Grant noticed. His gaze flicked from the crowd to the dog, then to Emma. Something unspoken passed between them, calculation on his side, certainty on hers. "You should go," he said quietly to Emma, leaning closer as if sharing concern. "You work in medicine, right? She'll need someone calm." Emma shook her head. "You go," she said. "I'll stay here." Grant's jaw tightened. That's not what decent people do. Decent people don't leave engines running with someone tapping for help inside. She shot back. His eyes hardened. "You're making a mistake." Before she could answer, the woman's sobs grew louder. "Please," she begged anyone listening. "Someone help me." A middle-aged man in a parka stepped up. "I'll check outside," he said, already heading toward the parking lot. Grant swore under his breath. He glanced at the van, then back at the building. Emma could almost see the gears turning. Inside the van, Lucas Reed heard the distant shouting. A child, a woman screaming. Confusion rippled through his fog of pain. He forced himself to focus, to stay conscious. He had done what he could. Now all he could do was wait. Outside, Emma made her choice. "Come on," she whispered to the dog. She didn't touch it. She didn't have to. She simply stepped away from the lights and toward the back of the rest stop, where the snow lay thicker and the shadows deepened. The dog followed immediately. They moved quietly along the side of the building, away from the crowd and the noise. Emma's breath came fast, her pulse thudding in her ears. Every instinct told her this was dangerous. Every other instinct told her it was necessary. Behind them, Grant turned back from the building, irritation etched into his features when he saw where Emma was headed. "Hey," he called. "What do you think you're doing?" She didn't answer. She rounded the corner and stopped short. The rear of the van loomed in front of her, taller and more ominous up close. Snow clung to the hinges. The dog pressed its nose to the metal, breathing in deep, urgent pulls. Emma leaned closer, her ear near the door. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the engine and the wind. Then, soft, unmistakable, came a labored breath. Her stomach dropped. "There you are," Grant said behind her. She spun around. He stood a few feet away now, his friendly demeanor gone entirely. One hand hovered near his jacket, where something solid pulled the fabric down. "You need to walk away," he said, his voice low. "Right now." "There's a man in there," Emma said. "I hear him." Grant exhaled slowly, like someone losing patience. "You're not going to be a hero tonight." The dog stepped forward, placing itself squarely between them. Its body was low, coiled, ready. Grant sneered. "You think that Mutt's going to stop me?" He moved. The dog reacted faster than Emma could track, snapping forward to latch onto the sleeve of his jacket, wrenching his arm sideways. Grant shouted, stumbling back, cursing as he yanked free. The sound echoed across the lot. "Get away from the van!" he roared. Emma's hand flew to the emergency call box mounted on the wall behind her. She slammed the button. A piercing alarm shrieked into the night, slicing through the chaos like a blade. Heads whipped around. The crowd near the building froze, attention snapping back toward the sound. Red lights began to flash above the call box. Grant's face drained of color. "You idiot!" he hissed. The dog growled, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from somewhere ancient. At that moment, a man burst out of the building holding a small boy wrapped in a jacket. "He was locked in the men's room," the man shouted. "He's okay." Relief rippled through the crowd, immediately followed by confusion as everyone turned toward the alarm and the raised voices at the back of the lot. Grant looked from the gathering onlookers to the van, then back at Emma. His eyes were wild now, stripped of pretense. He lunged for the driver's door. "No!" Emma screamed. The dog sprinted, throwing itself toward the front tire just as Grant slammed into the seat and gunned the engine. The van lurched, skidded, then stalled as the dog clamped onto the rubber, refusing to let go. Grant cursed, pounding the steering wheel. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emma dropped to her knees beside the rear doors, hands shaking as she fumbled for the handle. "Hold on," she cried. "We're here." Inside, Lucas Reed closed his eyes, tears burning as the sounds outside grew louder, closer. For the first time since he'd been taken, the world was not moving away from him. It was coming back. The van shuddered once more, then fell silent. Snow hissed against hot metal as the engine finally gave up. The sudden quiet, almost as loud as the chaos that followed. Grant Harlow slammed his fist against the steering wheel, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Outside, the dog still clung to the front tire, teeth sunk deep into rubber, body braced as if it understood exactly what was at stake. Emma scrambled to her feet and ran to the back of the van. Her hands shook so badly she missed the handle the first time. "Hold on," she said again, her voice cracking. "Please, just hold on." She yanked at the rear doors. Locked. "Damn it," she whispered, slamming her palm against the metal. "Can you hear me?" She pressed her ear close, her cheeks stinging from the cold. Inside, Lucas Reed heard her voice like it was coming through water. Relief surged through him so fast it made him dizzy. He tried to respond, but the tape over his mouth muffled everything into a desperate grunt. He forced his bound hands upward and banged weakly against the door. Tap, tap, tap. Emma gasped. "I hear you," she said. "I hear you." Footsteps pounded behind her. She turned just in time to see Grant fling the driver's door open and jump out, fury etched across his face. Snow sprayed under his boots as he charged toward her. "Get away from that door," he shouted. The dog released the tire and lunged between them, planting itself squarely in Grant's path. Its lips curled back, teeth flashing now, a low, thunderous growl ripping from its chest. Grant skidded to a stop. His hand darted inside his jacket and came out holding a folded knife, the blade snapping open with a sharp metallic click. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Don't," she said, holding her hands up. "This doesn't have to go any further." Grant laughed, high and brittle. "It already has." He slashed downward, not at Emma, but at the dog. The dog dodged with astonishing speed, snapping at Grant's forearm, forcing him to stumble back. Emma seized the moment. She spun and ran toward the side of the building, her eyes locking onto the fire extinguisher mounted near the loading door. She ripped it from the wall, nearly losing her grip as Grant recovered and lunged again. She squeezed the handle. White powder exploded into the air, engulfing Grant's face and chest. He screamed, swiping blindly, coughing and choking as the extinguisher's contents coated his eyes. The dog charged, knocking Grant off balance. He hit the ground hard, the knife skidding across the ice. "Stay down!" Emma yelled, her voice hoarse. Sirens grew louder now, slicing through the night. Red and blue lights washed over the snow, over the van, over the small crowd that had begun to gather again despite the cold. A sheriff's cruiser screeched into the lot, followed by a second. Doors flew open. "On the ground!" a deputy shouted. "Hands where we can see them." Grant didn't hesitate. He rolled to his knees and bolted toward the trees at the edge of the lot. The dog was faster. It launched after him, a blur of gray and muscle, catching Grant by the back of his jacket and dragging him down. They hit the snow together in a tangle of limbs. Grant fought, swinging wildly, but the dog held fast, pinning him until deputies rushed in and hauled him away, cuffs snapping closed around his wrists. Emma barely registered it. She was already back at the van, shouting at the deputies. "There's someone inside. He's been tied up. He needs help now." One of the deputies ran to the back doors and tried the handle. "Locked," he said. "Move," another officer barked, raising his baton. He struck the lock hard. Metal groaned but held. "Get the crowbar." Lucas's vision blurred as voices multiplied outside. His strength was gone now, adrenaline draining fast. He slumped against the wall, his breath shallow and uneven. He focused on one thing, staying awake. The crowbar came down with a brutal crack. The lock gave way, snapping open. The doors were wrenched apart. Cold air rushed in. Light. Lucas squinted as faces loomed into view, their expressions shifting from urgency to shock. "Oh my God," someone breathed. Hands reached for him, careful but quick. The tape was peeled from his mouth, ripping away with a sting that made him gasp. Fresh air burned his lungs. "Easy," a voice said. "You're safe. You're safe now." Lucas tried to speak. Nothing came out but a broken rasp. Tears spilled down his face as the reality of it hit him all at once. He was alive. Emma hovered at the edge of the van, heart pounding, watching as paramedics slid a stretcher into place. When they lifted Lucas out, she saw the full extent of his injuries. The bruises, the raw skin at his wrists, the hollowed look of a man who had been running on will alone. Their eyes met. "Thank you," he mouthed, barely audible. She swallowed hard and nodded. "You did the hard part," she said. "You didn't give up." As they carried him toward the ambulance, the dog trotted alongside, never taking its eyes off Lucas. When they set the stretcher down, the dog pressed close, whining softly, its tail low, but wagging just enough to show relief. Lucas lifted one trembling hand and rested it against the dog's head. The dog went still, leaning into the touch like it had been waiting for it all along. Deputies dragged Grant past them, his face red and streaked with extinguisher residue, eyes burning with hatred. He twisted in their grip, glaring at Emma. "You think you won?" he snarled. She met his gaze, steady now. "I know I did." An officer stepped between them. "Sir, you're done." As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens flared again, Emma sank down onto the icy curb, her legs finally giving out beneath her. The dog padded over and sat beside her, close enough that she could feel its warmth through her coat. She reached out, hesitating only a moment before resting her hand on its back. "Good job," she whispered. "You saved his life." The dog didn't look at her. Its eyes were on the ambulance as it pulled away, following until the lights disappeared into the falling snow. Somewhere deep inside Emma, something shifted. This wasn't over. Not for the man who had been found, and not for the dog who had refused to look away. The rest stop didn't return to normal once the sirens faded. It never really could. Snow continued to fall, but now it settled on tire tracks cut deep by patrol cars and the ambulance that had already vanished down the highway. Deputies moved with clipped efficiency, stringing yellow tape around the white van, snapping photos, speaking into radios. A small knot of onlookers stood near the building, wrapped in coats and quiet, their earlier panic replaced by stunned disbelief. Emma watched it all from the curb where she still sat, her back against the cold concrete. Her hands trembled, not from the cold this time, but from the slow release of adrenaline. The world felt too loud and too distant all at once, like she was standing just outside her own body. Beside her, the dog sat upright, alert but calm. It had not moved far from her since the ambulance left. While deputies questioned witnesses and a tow truck driver arrived to take the van, the dog remained where it was, eyes tracking every motion with the same measured focus it had shown all night. A deputy approached, notebook in hand. He looked down at the dog, then back at Emma. "Is this yours?" Emma shook her head. "No, I don't even know where it came from." The deputy crouched a few feet away, extending a cautious hand. "Hey, buddy." The dog didn't react. It didn't growl or pull away. It simply looked past the deputy toward the road where the ambulance had disappeared. "Huh," the deputy murmured. He straightened and scribbled something down. "We'll call animal control once things calm down." Emma felt a tightness in her chest. "Can you wait?" she asked. "At least for a bit." The deputy studied her face, then the dog again. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I think he's waiting for someone." The deputy followed her gaze to the dark highway. For a moment his expression softened. "All right," he said. "For now." Across the lot, Grant Harlow was being loaded into the back of a cruiser. His earlier rage had cooled into something darker, silent, simmering. As the door slammed shut, his eyes found Emma one last time. There was no apology there. No regret. Only calculation, already searching for a way out. Emma didn't look away. The dog's ears flattened, a low rumble vibrating through its chest as the cruiser pulled out. Only when the taillights vanished did the sound fade. Minutes stretched. The crowd thinned as people drifted back to their cars, shaken but eager to leave. The woman whose son had gone missing approached Emma, her face pale but steady now. "Thank you," she said quietly. If you hadn't stayed back there." Emma shook her head. "Your son's safe. That's what matters." The woman glanced at the dog. "Is he yours?" "No," Emma said again, more softly. "But he's the reason any of this happened." The woman nodded, lips pressed together, then walked away. An hour later, the rest stop was nearly empty. Emma stood and stretched stiff legs, the night finally catching up with her. She looked down at the dog. "You can go," she said gently. "You don't owe anyone anything." The dog didn't move. She sighed and managed a small smile. "Didn't think so." A state trooper approached with a small device in hand. "Mind if I check him for a chip?" he asked. Emma nodded. The trooper knelt and ran the scanner along the dog's shoulder. It beeped once. "Huh," the trooper said. He stood and stepped aside to make a call, speaking quietly into his radio. A few minutes later, he returned. His expression changed. "He's got a chip," he said. "Old one. Military." Emma's breath caught. "Military?" "Yeah," the trooper said. "K9 unit. Retired, looks like. Or abandoned." She looked at the dog again, at the scars she'd only half noticed before, the discipline in the way it held itself, the precision of its movements. It all clicked into place. "That explains it," she whispered. The trooper nodded. He probably recognized the signs before anyone else did. As if on cue, headlights appeared at the far end of the lot. Emma's heart jumped. She knew before the vehicle pulled close. The ambulance returned, slower this time, lights off. It parked near the curb, and a paramedic stepped out. "Miss Collins," he called. She hurried over. "How is he?" "Stable," the paramedic said. "Dehydrated, bruised, but he's going to make it. He asked for you." Emma blinked. He did. He also asked about the dog. She turned back. The dog was already on its feet, tail low but moving, eyes fixed on the ambulance. They wheeled Lucas Reed out slowly, bundled in blankets, an IV line taped to his arm. His face was pale, drawn, but his eyes were clear now, focused, alive. As they stopped beside Emma, his gaze shifted past her. There was no hesitation. "That's him," Lucas rasped, his voice barely more than a whisper. "That's the one." Emma stepped aside. The dog approached the stretcher with quiet reverence, stopping just close enough to be invited. Lucas lifted his hand, fingers trembling, and rested it against the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes closing for a brief, precious moment. "You stayed," Lucas whispered. "You didn't leave." The dog exhaled softly, as if that was answer enough. A nurse cleared her throat. "We should get him inside." Lucas nodded reluctantly. Before they moved him, he looked at Emma. "He saved my life." She swallowed. "You saved your own," she said. "He just made sure someone listened." As they rolled Lucas away, the dog followed for several steps, then stopped. It watched until the doors closed behind them. Emma stood in the cold, feeling something settle in her chest, not fear anymore, but resolve. The dog turned to her then, really looked at her, as if asking a question. She knelt in the snow and met its gaze. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said quietly. The dog didn't answer, but it didn't walk away. And in the hush that followed, Emma understood something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Some guardians aren't assigned. They choose. The hospital room was quiet in the way only early mornings ever were. The machines hummed softly, their steady rhythms a reminder that life had returned to something measurable. Pale winter light slipped through the narrow window, brushing the walls with a muted glow that felt almost gentle. Staff Sergeant Lucas Reed lay propped up against stiff white pillows, a blanket pulled to his chest. His wrists were wrapped now, the angry red marks fading slowly into yellow and purple bruises. Every breath still hurt, but it was the good kind of pain, the kind that meant he was breathing on his own. A nurse adjusted his IV and smiled. "You've got a visitor," she said quietly. Emma stepped in, her coat folded over one arm, her hair pulled back in a tired knot. She looked different in the calm of daylight, less like someone braced for impact and more like someone finally allowing herself to feel what had happened. "You don't have to stay long," Lucas said, his voice hoarse but stronger than before. "They tell me I'll be asleep again soon." "That's fine," Emma replied. "I just wanted to see you with my own eyes." He smiled faintly. "Funny, that's exactly what saved me." She pulled a chair closer and sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were too many words, and none of them felt quite right. "They told me what they found," Lucas said at last. "The van, the fake delivery routes. He wasn't just moving me. He'd done it before." Emma nodded. "They said the dog's chip helped connect a few things too." Lucas's eyes softened. Of course it did. As if summoned by the sound of his voice, there was a soft scuff at the doorway. The dog stood there, cleaner now, fur brushed but still rough in places, a temporary collar looped loosely around its neck. A volunteer from Animal Services hovered behind him, uncertain. "He hasn't wanted to be anywhere else," she said apologetically. We thought you might want to see him." Lucas's breath caught. "Please," he said. "Bring him in." The dog padded into the room without hesitation, moving slowly, carefully, as if aware of the wires and unfamiliar smells. It stopped beside the bed and looked up at Lucas, ears relaxed, eyes warm and steady. Lucas reached out. His hand shook, but the dog didn't flinch. It leaned forward, pressing its forehead gently into Lucas's palm. A tear slipped free, tracing a clean line down Lucas's cheek. "I thought I was dead," he whispered. "I really did. Everyone walked past me. Everyone." The dog stayed still. "You didn't," Lucas said. "You saw me." Emma looked away, giving him privacy, though her own eyes burned. Later that afternoon, a state investigator stopped by Emma's clinic. She was restocking supplies when he arrived, his coat dusted with melting snow. "We finished running the dog's chip," he said. His service name was Scout. Emma smiled softly. "That fits." "He was part of a military canine unit," the investigator continued. "Explosives detection, high scores. Calm under pressure. He was retired early after an injury. Looks like he never made it to a proper placement." "So he ended up out there," Emma said. "Yeah," the investigator replied. "Still working, apparently." That evening, Emma sat on the steps outside her small house, the cold, biting but familiar. Scout lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, watching the street like he always watched everything, quietly, thoroughly. "You don't have to stay," she told him, echoing her words from the night before. "Animal Services will find you a place, a good one." Scout didn't move. She exhaled slowly. "I thought so." 2 weeks passed. Lucas recovered steadily, his strength returning in small victories. He walked the halls with a cane, then without. He spoke more, laughed a little, learned how to sleep without jolting awake at every sound. He told investigators everything he could remember, filling in gaps that helped close cases stretching across state lines. One afternoon, he asked for Emma again. She arrived with Scout at her side. Lucas stood when he saw them, swaying slightly but determined. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small metal tag. "I had this made," he said, pressing it into Emma's hand. She turned it over. "Scout Guardian." Emma swallowed. "It's perfect." Lucas knelt carefully and clipped the tag onto Scout's collar. Scout stood still, accepting it like a badge he'd been waiting for. "I don't know what happens next," Lucas said quietly. "For me, or for him. But I know this. He's not a stray. He's a soldier." Emma nodded. "So are you." They stood there for a moment, 3 lives bound together by a night that could have ended very differently. Weeks later, the snow melted. The rest stop returned to its usual rhythm, no trace left of what had happened there, except a repaired door and a quiet understanding among those who knew. The world moved on, as it always did. But some things didn't go back to the way they were. Scout slept by Emma's front door every night, not because she asked him to, but because he chose to. Lucas came by when he could, walking stronger each time, bringing coffee, bringing stories, bringing gratitude that never seemed to fade. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Lucas stood in Emma's yard, watching Scout patrol the fence line with practiced ease. "You know," Lucas said, "people keep asking me what saved me." Emma smiled. "What do you tell them?" He watched Scout stop, turn, and look back at them, just checking. "I tell them it wasn't the signal," Lucas said. "It was the one who noticed it." Emma nodded, understanding settling deep in her chest. In a world full of noise and hurry, one dog had listened, and because of that, one man came home,